New research indicates that as fertility rates have fallen around the world over the last decade, the U.S. has experienced a decline as well. According to data from the Institute for Family Studies, which consider the declining fertility rates in the U.S. in terms of missing births, American women had 5.8 million fewer babies over the last decade. Brad Wilcox, senior fellow at the Institute for Family Studies, joins me now on Skype to talk more about what we are seeing here in the U.S. and around the world. Brad, welcome. Great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk a little bit more about the concept of missing births and why that's so significant.
So what we're seeing across much of the world today is that women are having fewer than 2.1 kids in their countries. And what that means is that long term, many of those countries are going to start shrinking because they don't have enough kids to kind of sustain their populations.
You know, I think a lot of people assumed as the coronavirus lockdowns began that we could probably start seeing a baby boom instead of what we're actually seeing right now, which is being called a baby bust. Do we know yet how much of an impact the pandemic has had?
Well, we've seen some dramatic numbers out of some countries like Italy, for instance. They've seen numbers, fertility numbers going down by about 20% in December, because of COVID. We think here in the U.S. it's going to be probably closer to 5 or 6% down. But, the bottom line here is that I think in the face of so much economic insecurity and so much concern about sort of the broader medical situation, a lot of couples, did not go ahead with having kids in the past, 10 months or so. And hopefully as, we begin to kind of come out of this pandemic, there'll be more confidence among, couples across the U.S. to go ahead and have kids that they were hoping to have earlier.
And Brad, I want to go back to that figure that we put up just a moment ago. 5.8 million fewer babies born here in the U.S. over the last decade. Talk a little bit more about what factors you think contributed to that, as obviously that was before the pandemic hit.
So what's striking about fertility in America is it's really falling, pretty markedly in the last decade. Part of that's about economics. People have, I think, less sense of security about kind of where the economy is headed. Wages haven't kind of been as high as they could be for people who don't have college degrees. But I think there's also a way in which Americans have become more hesitant to go ahead and sort of risk having a child today. And that's sort of more of a cultural issue that we're seeing among a lot of young adults across this country.
And Brad, this is sort of a two-part question here. First off, what are the implications or consequences for the future, if we don't see these numbers turn around? And then also, I know you know this, it is National Marriage Week. And as someone who studies these issues, how do you think we can best help promote marriage and family and reverse these trends that we're seeing?
Well, I think what's concerning about these recent fertility trends is that we're kind of on a track here. We might end up like Japan, where there's sort of economic stagnation. There's not enough dynamism because they're just not having enough people to enter into the economy and, produce goods, pay taxes and like. There's also kind of a profound personal issue here playing out as well. And that is that we're seeing that people are reporting that they're not having the kids that they had hoped to have in this new world that we're living in. And so what that means is that as people kind of move into middle adulthood and they're, the last chapters of their lives, they often don't have, any kids. They don't have the kids that they had hoped to have. And that can lead, of course, to any number of things, including a profound sense of loneliness. Now, in terms of thinking about kind of National Marriage Week, I think, we are also seeing in this year kind of probably the lowest rates of marriage that we've seen, in our nation's history, or at least in this last year, basically. And this is partly obviously due to COVID, but I think there's been a kind of a longer term decline in marriage and a longer term decline in family formation. And so we should be thinking about both a kind of a cultural message that sort of underlines the ways in which Americans who are in families, having families, tend to be the happiest Americans. I think that's often unknown today in the general population. We also need to be thinking about economic policies that we can pursue to make it easier for folks to have kids. And that's why I'm supportive, for instance, of Senator Romney's new child allowance, which would give families more money when it comes to covering the costs of raising the next generation. So it's these kinds of policies that I think are needed to help Americans, particularly working class and middle class Americans, have the economic confidence they need to go forward with having and raising the next generation.
Brad, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about it. We really appreciate it. Brad Wilcox, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Family Studies. Thank you again.
Thank you.